what is a godly man looking for in a wife?
Having a spouse that fears God, it makes the difficult things easy. And it'd be hard to make decisions, big decisions about your life, if you feel like one is making decisions based off of worldly opinions and the other one is basing decisions off of godly counsel.
Well, you're not trying to call them out. You're trying to call them up.
I think there's things that just won't change.
Welcome back to the Dear Future Husband podcast. I'm your host, Christian. Yes, it's still me, even though I don't sound like myself. Unfortunately, I have a little bit of a head cold today, but thankfully, I have a guest with me. I'm bringing back my favorite guest, I think becoming one of the audience's favorite guests.
Well, I thought you were going to say your guest that you had on today
was
Tatum.
I'm wearing.
Because that's the other reason you might not sound like yourself.
It is Tatum's first episode, and if you're listening on the podcast, this is a good segue to start watching on YouTube, because then you can see a cute baby asleep that I'm wearing. But I'm so glad that you're joining me, and we're answering some more of the ladies' questions today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited always to be here, have a conversation with my wife, and I love everything that God just continues to keep doing this and the conversations that are happening, and then also everything that's coming down the road with all this. So
I know. What is he talking about? Well, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. But today we want to tackle the conversation, and actually, it is more of a conversation than a topic, because it's not necessarily formulaic for everyone, but this idea of what is a godly man looking for in a wife? What can single women be cultivating within themselves and doing in this season to make sure they're not just filling it, but deepening within themselves something that produces forth the desire that they want in their heart? So, I'm just bringing you on to answer as guys. What are they looking for in a wife?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, and I think we kind of identified three things. And the first thing is, and I feel like this was something that we both were like, yes, that's what we've got to put into there, is number one is finding a spouse that's going to challenge you. So finding a wife that's going to challenge you, which I think is difficult in the dating period, because I think even from a perspective of a guy, sometimes as a guy, it'd be like, if there's a woman that challenges you, some guys could see it as like an immediate red flag. It's like, oh man, I'm getting challenged in a certain way early on in the dating period. Is that a red flag? Is that going to be worse as we get older when we get married? Is that going to be something that's like marriage more feels like a bondage and a restriction rather than actually something that's going to propel me and help me in my life? And I think about challenging, I think about looking for someone that is going to bring out the best, someone that is not going just to allow you just to settle for, hey, I've accepted certain things in my life. This is just the way that I am, or this is the schedule that I want to keep.
Best is gonna get.
Yeah. Or like even like, I think we've talked about this in the past, but causing a man to grow up a little bit and not in a like, oh, they're childish, but like really challenging them and bringing out the man that is within them. I think that's why the Bible talks about it, that it finds a good thing, because there's ultimately something that needed to happen within man, that God looks at man and says it's not good for man to be alone. And so there's that element where it's like, if you as a woman just come in and you just kind of go with the flow of things, don't challenge, don't call to a higher standard, then you're almost negating what God was putting you in that person's life for, or putting you in that man's life for, because he's understanding it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for just a single man to be alone. We need to put someone else that's going to bring out the best, that's going to challenge, that's going to spend time with them, that's going to cultivate them, that's going to grow, that's going to do those things. And challenging for people can look like different ways.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you do that well? Because you hear the women that are like, well, I don't want to be his mother. I don't want to have to like raise him. But then you also hear men that are like, oh, well, she's too intimidating. She's too successful, or she has too big of a vision. So like, where's the balance?
Yeah, I think it's honestly being spirit led a little bit on it, and understanding like, if there's things, like obviously if there's things that you see in this individual's life that you're like, man, that's just something he loves to do. And that's, maybe it might be childish. Yeah, like maybe it could be video games. It could be something different. It's like, yeah, it might be childish, but in moderation, I think it's an okay thing. But if you see it as, let's say specifically on video games side of things, if you see it as it becomes the constant thing that's dictating his life, and you see that there's a lack of
Stifling,
of vision, because I think when a man is not like honed in on something, it's hard for him to find vision. Like if he is so distracted by games or friends, like, because that's a big thing.
That's
is
true.
ultimately you can have friends that are going to help you go towards your destiny and towards your vision, but you can also have friends that, especially like coming out of college and high school years, like you might have friends that all they want to do is just party. Like they want to continue to keep hanging out, drinking, playing video games late at night, and like doing those things. And if that's kind of what you're just continuing to see in the dating period, I will say it'll be hard to challenge that, because what you have to do is you almost have to call out, like not from a standpoint of, oh man, you shouldn't be doing that, or I don't think you should be hanging out, because then it will feel like, well, is this really my place to speak into that, or is that overbearing? But then it's more to call out and challenge the vision of like, no, hey, I see, like there's a lot on your life. And I actually feel like you hanging out with those people, not that I'm saying I don't think you should ever hang out with those people again. It's like, no, you're not, and especially in the dating period, you're not their spouse, you're not their wife. So you don't have the authority to be able to do that. But what you do have the ability as someone that's close to them, in the same way that a friend would be able to do this as well, is say, you know what, hey, those people, I know what's on your life. I've heard you talk about the dreams, the visions, the things that you feel like God's placed inside of you. Those people aren't going to get you there.
Yeah.
That schedule is not going to get you there. That habit is not going to get you there. Like, and challenge them in that way. And I think then that will only bleed into marriage even more so, where challenging a marriage again is not just the nagging and, oh, hey, you're doing this, but it's the like continuing just to make sure, hey, I know this person's better. I know all that you can be. I mean, I look at it, the countless times I'm on a phone call and I'm getting intense, because me as an 8, it's like, I just want to get more and more intense. And you're just over there in the background, like, he's up, like, hey, he's up, like, and you just remind me, like, okay, hey, this is not going to be productive. I've heard what you're wanting to communicate.
This
I know
is so
what
beautiful.
you want to.
I'm crying.
Yes,
my eyes
your
are watering.
eyes are watering because.
But it is.
I
mean, actually, it is a beautiful thing, because what I hear you say is you have the ability to see something special within this person, and I think for a woman, that's confirmation of, oh, this is someone that has potential, not like potential I'm going to fix them, but potential of like there's already good seeds, and I know it's only going to continue to grow. Because let's be real, when you're dating someone, you evaluate to see if there's good within them, but over time the beauty and the benefit of marriage is like you cultivate together, you grow together. So you had some points that I thought were really keen, and especially for the singleness is and it's not a nagging, like it's a presentation, because ultimately it's up to them if they choose to see it as like a challenge and a push away, or a challenge and like a call out, or like a call up. I think it's a good way. You're not trying to call them out, you're trying to call them up.
Yeah. And I think what I was even saying with that is, like, I think there's things that just won't change that you'll probably find out in marriage. Like my mom early on used to tell us boys, like, hey, if your husband, she was like, what I noticed with your dad is if he has done something consistently for 5 years and I've told him like, hey, you need to stop doing this. She's like, I'm not going to continue to keep calling it an annoyance or anything. I'm going to call it something like, this is something cute your father does.
Yeah.
Because she's like, there is some consistencies. There is some things that are going to change. And I think it's even important when you're understanding of not calling someone out, but calling someone up, is understanding like, well, what is this going to do in the long scheme of things? Like when I look at, maybe something annoying, I think we've talked about this before. Something annoying to do is I leave my socks every night by the ground. And I'm like, that's been something we have navigated all of our marriage life. And I'm trying to get better on it. But like, if you really made a case out of that, and if it was every single day, you were like, oh my gosh,
like
your
nagging
socks.
You. Yeah.
Like, why can you not just do this one thing? And rather than it be almost now like maybe something that I might leave for a trip and you might be like, oh, there's no socks there. I might see that as I miss him. Like I miss that he's being there, because his normal routine is take off his socks as he's jumping in bed. And so
now we just joke out of her like, oh, how did those get there?
Yeah. And so obviously like understanding, well, is this something that is going to be, I'm challenging because it's an annoyance. I'm challenging because it's just, I don't like you doing this, and so I want you to change it? Or is it, I'm calling you up because I see this as actually something that is going to get in the way of what I see you becoming, and I need to call you up for that.
Right. And I think if you want a biblical example of this, I mean, it's the iron sharpens iron verse, and you can do that in friendship, but you also should be doing that in your relationships too. And there's going to be some friction within that, but like, do you see the sparks as like a good thing? Like sparks make fire, fire makes warmth. Warmth is, essential. So are you going to lean into that tension together? Like, is this one that can challenge you? And then ladies, is this someone that's going to reciprocate that challenge as a benefit? So
and
I think that's a great first one.
And testing's good. Like we always kind of look at testing as a negative thing, but Job understands. He tests me as I come out as pure as gold. It's like understanding is God will send us through these tests, and whether it feels like God allowed or even man brought on. And like those testing periods for a guy, if they're listening to this, it's like understanding it's not your wife challenge you on something is not something that's just a negative thing. It's bringing out the gold that is within you, or your girlfriend challenge you on something, like it's bringing out the gold that needs to be refined from your life. Like you can look at every single person and you can look at their life and you could clearly probably see that there's impurities that God wants to remove from their life. And so God will allow things to happen in their life. And even looking at Job, like his wife didn't handle it the right way. His wife, her first response is, why don't you curse God and die? Like, not really the best wife there. And she's blaming him for everything that happens and just basically nags him on everything, where you have this man who's lost everything, rather than calling him up and understanding, like, no, God, go to God, go seek God, seek what he is, seek what he's done for you. Like understand the promises of God. He's testing something in you. He's doing something in you. I believe in you, like challenging in that. And then Job ultimately being able to be refined in that period of time and seeing an expression of God that was pretty amazing.
Well, I think that's because it's always uncomfortable, right? Like it's going to be uncomfortable to lose something. It's going to be uncomfortable to deal with those things. But which are you going to choose? Like our tendency isn't, especially if we're young, the tendency is not to lean into the good tension. But I think that's such a beneficial thing. If you are single, learn how to lean into that tension yourself once you're able to receive it from your partner. But then so you're able to give it back too, because we get to choose the fruit we lean into. It doesn't mean it's always comfortable, but it's going to be good. And I think that's a great way to put a bow on that is it impurities or imperfections? Everyone's going to have imperfections. But what are the actual impurities that one could hinder your marriage, but also could grow you if you lean into the purification process? So that's number one. You got to be someone that's ready to be challenged and ready to challenge.
Yes. Yeah. And then number two, and this one might feel like cliche and kind of a typical like Bevere answer, but
stay tuned. This
was, I think, is the fear of the Lord, like making sure there's a healthy fear of God. Yeah. The awe of God in someone's life. I mean, I look at the Bible and just everything that the Bible promises for people who fear God. And it's like, why would you not? Can you list off some of those? I mean, it's a long life beginning. I mean, like you could just take this one, just as the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, like understanding what that actually means when you're breaking that down as a whole scope of things. Like you want someone to be wise. I've always looked at it as like knowledge is nothing without wisdom. Like you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you actually don't know how to interact it, I heard it said once that knowledge is a house and wisdom is a home. So like knowledge is a structure, framework, a look at everything that you have, maybe like the walls, but wisdom is actually taking what you have and being able to make it livable, home, and steadied. And so there's the blessings for your family, there's blessings for your children, and there's blessings of wealth and prosperity. There's blessings for a relationship, a deeper intimacy with God. So I look at all these things, and I love this. Proverbs 31 says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so understanding like there is a person who genuinely fears God, there's almost an insurance there in my mind. And I remember early on in our marriage, like our first, like, or our really big fights within our first 2 years of marriage.
Oh, 2 of them.
Yes. was are we supposed to be in Colorado? And for like everyone, the context of that is we lived in Colorado right after we got married. And it was because my family had been in Colorado since 1999, and God spoke and told my family to move to Colorado in 1999. And then Christian and I get married in 2018.
And I'm from Alabama.
Yep. I take her away from there, from Alabama, the warmth, put her in cold Colorado. And she just didn't have relationships, didn't have friendships. And I remember we continued to argue, like, why are we here? And my whole standpoint was like, God spoke to my family 20 years ago. And it was really hard to like, for Christian to continue like, be like, God didn't speak to me, but like understanding we're like going through this motion. But what
your relationships have evolved for all of you boys.
Yeah.
So has the vision evolved?
Yeah. And I remember what I kept telling you is I said, like, I have not heard God speak. Like, and I so often remember telling you, like, you need to trust me. And like, you need to trust yourself as well, as that I fear God. I know you fear God, which means if God speaks to us and tells us to move tomorrow, we're moving. Like I'm not going to wrestle with it. I'm not just going to stay out of, because comfortability, because we've been here all this time. It was, no, if God's going to speak to me, we're going to do it. And I think that's what you need to have as a spouse, of something just very much preparing your heart and understanding, like, look, I'm not going to allow comfortability. I'm not going to allow anything. Like, I need to understand that there's promises that are waiting for my family that me as a wife or a future wife, I have to take hold of right now. And that comes from someone that is cultivating a fear of God and understanding and having that assurity, because it would be really hard. Like if one of you fears God and the other one's kind of tiptoeing their relationship with God and loves the things of the world more than they fear God and all these things. And it'd be hard to make decisions, big decisions about your life, if you feel like one is making decisions based off of worldly opinions and the other one is basing decisions off of godly counsel and godly wisdom and what God's speaking to them. And that just makes it difficult. And so if you have a spouse that fears God, I think it just is a success for marriage.
Mm-hmm. In all those conversations, big or small, where you live, who you do life with. I'll be honest, in that time, I felt like God was preparing my heart for somewhere else. And I was like, Lord, you either need to plant me here so I can be a good wife and on board with this vision, or the more you kept saying, like, will you trust that I'm fearing God and I'm listening to God in this? To me, that was a time of, okay, my fear of God is going to go past only myself. And it was like, that was the first real extension of like, okay, Lord, I trust you so much that I trust that you'll speak to my husband too, that you'll keep us aligned in this. And then lo and behold, a few months after that, maybe a year after that, God united us in like the perfect timing and your family. So I'm like, there's twofold, like you fear God and you see him work in so many different ways. And I'm so thankful for that experience early on where it wasn't, all these things are going to be uncomfortable. It wasn't comfortable to wait and then even question myself, like, well, do I fear God? Do I hear from God? Yeah. And just the patience and the trust in that, I think, brought such fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm glad we live in Tennessee.
No, I know. And it all worked out. But I just remember all those conversations. And I think having someone as a wife that feared God made those conversations a lot easier. I think they could become something that was a sticking point. But having a spouse that fears God, it makes the difficult things easy. It makes them, they're easier. Easier. Yeah. They're not without challenge, but it's just having that trust in God is really just the key thing for all this. And I mean, even early on in our marriage, like there's things that I very much will be very honest, I did not handle well in those conversations. And I remember so often even using Ruth as an analogy with you and understanding, like, look, Ruth's like, where you go, I will go. Your God, my God. Like, yeah. You're stuck in this. Like you're here. This is the analogy I'm going to keep using. Like
I'll push you somewhere and then I'll follow you.
Yeah, you're right here and you're stuck here. And this is like when God moves, when we move, like that kind of thing. But I look at the grace that came from that, because ultimately we both feared God, and God knew, like, yeah, you might not be handling these conversations the best way, but I'm still going to be able to work through that.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point, though, because it's not about hearing him perfect and doing it perfectly the whole time. It's like keeping that heart posture, because I do see in that you were just trying to make sure that we lived according to what was purposeful and what was God's plan. So I just think if we can get so in our heads about, like, is this the right person? Is this the right timing? Am I ready? Just keep following the heart of God and like stay attuned to that. We were even talking the other night about Saul and David. Like they both messed up, but David's heart remained for God. And I think that allowed, one, for redemption, but then two, for him to realign to the path. So it's such a crucial thing to fear God for both of you, even as you're just a single. If you don't get married, it directs you.
Yeah, and like, what better thing for your life if you don't get married, or like to just prepare yourself for is fearing God. As I talked about, like, go through Proverbs, go through Psalms, go through Ecclesiastes, go through Samuel, like Bible. Both books of Samuel. Like, just go through, go through so much of these books, and all they talk about is like these promises of the fear of God, and if you miss out on that, you're missing out on a lot.
Okay, before we hit point number 3, the last one, do you have any bonuses or honorable mentions?
Oh, yes. I mean, most people would want to hear is like, you got to work on yourself. You got to look good. You got to eat good. You got to do all those things.
It's important.
It's a very honorable mention. I mean, I spent most of my time at the gym before meeting you.
You did, and I'm gonna say you looked good. Yeah. I think for women sometimes it's a little bit harder. We're like, what do we got to do? I'm gonna be honest. Why don't you start eating well? And that's not girl dinners. That's not just the green smoothies and the salads. I can't tell you how much protein has actually made a difference. And you've introduced me to this. Eating protein to build muscle, it helps be lean. It helps you to feel good. And I'm so excited for the girls that are like, how do I do that? Like, do I just go buy steak? I don't know where to go. It's just me and my roommates. So we actually found a company that takes the headache out and adds all the benefit.
So it's a company called Good Ranchers, which Good Ranchers is amazing because it not only takes out your ability to have to go to the grocery store and pick out the perfect meat, but they actually ship it directly to your home, and you don't need to worry about what is in my meat, what did someone put into it. It is all coming from 100% American farms, and they go to every single farm. Yeah, they go to every single farm, make sure that it is high quality, no additional things, making sure that the cows are getting everything that they needed, which on top of this, which you might be like, why are you guys talking about meat? The company themselves are run by godly people. So they actually just love our family, and they wanted to come and just support us in this way. And so we started doing it, and it has made our life significantly simpler. And because we go into our fridge, we pull out our freezer, we pull out exactly what we need to, and we always get a box that's coming to us every single month.
So Good Ranchers actually is a subscription model through goodranchers.com where they'll send it directly to your door. That means you don't have to run to the grocery store, look through all the ingredients, wonder, is this like a bad ingredient? Is this a good one? And they're doing something called a Spring into Action special right now where they'll send you either a free ground beef, free bacon, free salmon, or if you do want to still have the girl dinners, free chicken nuggets, and that's for an entire year. So I want you to, one, just like have this benefit because we've loved it. We think it's amazing, but also start getting your protein in so you can be ready for dinners with your dear future husband whenever you meet. And we're also going to get to offer you this bundle of $40 off your first box. And that's if you use our code DFH, Dear Future Husband, and that's at goodranchers.com. So get ready for those protein-packed dinners when you do get to meet your dear future husband, but start enjoying them now too. And you can use our code DFH for Dear Future Husband for $40 off your first package at goodranchers.com. I'm so glad
we below, and you'll definitely start looking better for your
there you
spouse.
go.
So we're your spouse right now, and get them looking better as well.
Do I look better?
You look fantastic. As always.
Okay, so honorable mention is the way that you look, but I want to know what's the third thing that's really key that you can be cultivating in yourself in the season, but also looking for.
Yeah, I mean, so the third one. This one's kind of interesting because I want to expound on it, but I think it's a kind and gentle spirit. And I think most people will hear that and be like, wait, like, so I just have to be nice all the time, or I need to be nice. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a gentle spirit to sensitivity of things of other people and the things of your relationship and the things of just the environment around you. Like I look at my mom, and like using my mom as an example, she is a type A personality. She is, she is mafia, like she's Sicilian, she always jokes about, Italians will feed you, but mafia, like Sicilians will kill you. And that was what I was raised with. But I look at my mom as this beautiful example of a godly woman, and her spirit, I always would tell people, like, she can be the most intense person that you ever meet, but she can also be the most nurturing person that you would ever encounter. And her spirit was so just aware of people that were around her, the people that are hurting, the people that just understanding, like, it's not just about me. It's not just about what I would want in life or the things that I want, but I have an awareness through my spirit of other people. I love what First Peter talks about in 1 Peter 3. It says the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. So understanding, like, there is a beauty that comes with this. Again, it's not just being meek. It's not being humble. It's not being quiet, timid. I mean, even so much in our early stage of our marriage, I would always challenge you because Christian would be so timid. And it was like one of the most painful things early on in our marriage where Christian would get on a customer service call.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like standing in the background, like, just say what you need. Like, and they would be like, no, man, we can't do that. And she's like, okay, thank you, bye. And I'm like, no, Christian, they can do that. Like, it's wrong that the product broke or something like that. And I remember just continuing to challenge you of like, hey, you need to be strong. And this wasn't the difference of a gentle spirit or not. It wasn't trying to get rid of your gentle spirit or anything. It was just understanding, like, you need to have boldness, but then you had the sensitivity to the people around you. I watch as we have moments where we're standing and you just feel so strongly. I mean, even the other day, you said you went to UPS and you felt so strongly, I'm supposed to pray for someone here. And you have that awareness for people around you, which makes it ultimately like life is not just about you. It's not about what you can get. It's not about the things that you can buy. It's not about the nice items that you will have. I think when you boil it down to that, it just makes yourself very self-focused. And I love that saying is like, selfishness is not thinking of less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. And it's understanding it's like, I have awareness. I have this gentle spirit to those of people around me. I understand the atmosphere that's around me. I understand the atmosphere that I'm going to bring into my family as I'm walking around. I look at my upbringing with my mom. Just because she was an intense person, there's never once where we're like, oh, this is a fearful environment, or this is a scary environment, or our house is scary because we have two very dominant A personality parents. It's like, no, they had a gentleness about them. They were very much aware of the things that was going on, very much aware of the environment, the atmosphere that was created within the house. And I think that's important for us, is understanding, like, we can't just continue to keep thinking about ourselves, continue to keep thinking about these things, and understanding, like, as we spend time with God, God's going to give us a spirit of gentleness. That doesn't mean that you're just becoming meek and humble. It means that you have a spirit about you that is otherworldly, a spirit about you that, like, this is God breathed, that it just exemplifies, like, when you walk into a room, people notice there's a difference, like there's a shift in the atmosphere.
It's not a personality, it's a presence.
Yeah. And I think that's the really important thing for a spouse, or for a wife specifically, in that kindness and gentle spirit. I think for a man, I think it's different. I think there's a little bit more of an authority and like, not so much of when I say power, I think people can think of like a toxic power spirit, but like a way you carry yourself in a room, of how you do that, where it's like, man, you have such a humility about you, but yet such a boldness. And I think that's kind of the spirit that God even gives to men when they walk in that way. Like, look at Jesus, and Jesus walked in such humility, but yet such boldness. He was kind, he's gentle. I always had this old teacher back in college, and she used to just like correct you so firmly, but that she would just smile like the whole time. And I look at it as like that, where it's like, you can just look at something and you have this spirit about you where it's like, man, this is not the normal thing. It doesn't matter what you're communicating. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. It's just what's coming from you. And I think that's an important thing that you can work on. And I mean, not you can work on specifically, but women can work on right now as you're kind of looking for your spouse, or even as you're married right now. And that comes from, again, just spending time with God. Right.
I mean, I think of, what is it, 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy, when you talk about the men, like it's the presence that has to have power with self-control and power with humility. And when I'm hearing this as a woman, I'm even thinking of like peaceableness and femininity. Like, your kindness is not just submission, weakness, like be a woman, be silent, but it's like, how do you carry and communicate the Spirit of God in your relationship, in your day-to-day life? And And yeah, I think it's so beautiful. Like we can be a strong woman, but still be feminine. We can be a compliment, but still be set apart. And so I think finding that in like the way that you advocate for yourself, the way you show up in your career and your relationships, in your friendships, is just so important. And it actually will translate into how you date and the type of guy you attract to. So that's another reason why we can go ahead and be cultivating that and working on it now.
Yeah, I love that. Which Tatum's trying to add on to all this. She feels like she's
like, I'm cute. I'm peaceable.
So
look how sweet I am.
Now that I'm finally awake, I'm happy to do this. But she has a nice mark on her face.
Well, you did so good. And I love all that you brought to this conversation. And I'd really love to hear how you ladies or men, we've had a strong company of men watching these videos now. I think they're like curious to tap into the other side of, well, what do these women want? What can I be doing? So leave a comment below how this spoke to you, maybe what you'd add on if you were talking to encourage someone else that's watching. And make sure you're subscribing so that you're a part of these for that reason, and so you don't miss an episode. And again, I'm Christian, and this is my husband,
Arden.
Yes. And we'll see you next time.